In the minds of some, sim racing is the pursuit of teenagers in their bedroom or in their basement. 60 plus Racing Adventures knows that not to be true. It's the pursuit of 60 plus year olds in their garage, in their living room, and in their basement. It's the iRacing League for drivers 60 years of age or over. It's gone from strength to strength, season to season, one of our longest running broadcasted series here on RaceSpotTV. And it's at one of the most beautiful, spectacular racetracks anywhere in the world, Monza, for a high-speed run at the Temple of Speed. David Haynes here with Ewan O'Leary on RaceSpotTV as we bring you live coverage of season 33 of 60 Plus Racing Adventures. Ewan, here's a look at the calendar where we find ourselves on January 22nd.
Yeah, the second of 3 broadcasted rounds, and by the way, the first of 3 in 5 rounds where we'll have pit stops required towards the end of the season, towards Imola. So that's going to be something to just think about over the course of today. But yeah, it's the Super Formula Lights League. It is Monza, and this car, I think, is going to suit this track very well indeed. Long time spent on the long straights around here, and some big chances to overtake in a very healthy field. I think in practice there I saw nearly 30 entered into this event.
Well, it's a track everyone knows, it's a track everyone loves, and it's one that can throw up some odd results from time to time because it has very high speeds, very high slipstreaming. We'll see what anyone can make happen. These are the championship standings at this point of the juncture. Greg Seitz on 240 points, John Payne there on 210, Roberto Catalano could be the hometown hero there with third in the points at 176 points, and then you see Mike McCormick, Russ Addy, Todd Scholl, Greg Garris, John Morgan, Paul Stump, and Franz Josef Sturm as our top 10.
Yeah, and it's still a very long way to go. I should actually say at this point that those points are relatively close, especially for those top guys, because you effectively take the best score from your finish in each of the races. So there's race 1 and then race 2, and you effectively just take the best score. There's a qualifying session for each as well. So you've got 2 chances, if you like, to score a race-winning amount of points for a season. So we could necessarily see on a particular day that the top 2 in the championship don't gain or lose any points on each other, which is a little bit rare, but that is a situation that is possible with this point system, allowing you to take only your best score from each round rather than having to take the both of them.
So qualifying right now, there'll be no slipstreaming in qualifying, but there will be plenty of it coming up in the race. We don't have any lap times yet, as most of the drivers are beginning to embark on their first of 2 timed flying laps. Paul Stump there. We're on board within 54 right now. Trying to pick his lines very carefully through Curva Grande to line himself up perfectly for the next braking zone. And here's where the curbs can be your friend, but they can be your enemy on a qualifying lap in a low-slung single-seater.
Yeah, especially that second chicane where actually you do be taking the risk a little bit of vaulting over those curves, because that's the quickest way to do it, but it is the risky way of doing it as well. Certainly getting a lap time in early on is a good idea by just staying on the road. Then out of Lesmo 2 they go, and towards Ascari under the bridge first, of course, the old oval, now in towards Ascari itself, missing the curb on the left hand side I would expect in this open wheeler, but just about clipping the red and white bit, then doing the same here, missing the anti-cuts is what I mean, really, not to fling the car up in the air and cause yourself a pretty big accident. As you say, these cars are very low slung, and so you can get yourself into trouble over the anti-cut curbs around this circuit, of which there are very many, very easily indeed.
Yep, I get into enough trouble without launching across anti-cut curbs as well, so I'd be staying off them too. And we're about to see some of the first lap times from Monza here. So Paul Stump's going to get to the timing line right there, and he's going to put in a lap time, or is he? Yes, he is, a 142.9. Greg Garris is up top with a 142.8. You can see it's super close, right at the top of the frame at the moment, with John Morgan going to the top, Russ Addy slotting into third. Bit of a gap back from 6th at the moment. It's your top 6 that are so close, as Roberto Catalano, Club Italia driver, goes to the top provisionally, displaced now by Ragnar Wisloff.
Yeah, good lap there from Wislov, who gets a quarter of a second's advantage over Castellano, but as you say, it's very close, and there Greg Seitz goes to the top as well. Very close though from 4th place right the way down to 9th really. Those drivers, those 6 drivers, separated by just less than 0.2 of a second or just over, so that's really where the field is very clumped together, and that's where in the race we could see slipstreaming really being a big factor, because around here at Monza the long straights mean you spend a long time on these straights in this car, and so lots of chance to slipstream. We'll see how that plays out over the course of the race as the first lap times that come through for the first time.
They do, and John Morgan, who we picked up when he was top of the board, now finds himself 5th. 4 drivers going quicker than him. He approaches the Ascari chicane. Long shadows at the moment over the racetrack as well in this morning time in the session. So you really are racing through the sun and then into the shadows at some of these braking zones. John Morgan's looking to improve on lap number 2. I think he will as well. This is a car that's a little difficult for its tyre warm-up, I think. They're still finding more grip the first lap to the second. Ragnar Wislov thinks that in the race they won't reach their peak pace until maybe lap 6, lap 7. So there's lots to gain late on in the qualifying session here. As Greg Seitz does so, John Payne does so. John Morgan moves up a little bit into 6th there, far more times flying in. It's Greg Seitz, Ragnar Wislov, course up the top at the moment. Here's going to be another time from Ragnar Wislov.
Is it going to be enough? Not quite. He's going to get very close, but he's 9 thousandths away. Very close indeed. Seitz is going to have the chance to go even further up ahead, by the way, with this run to the line. This is Barry Hills, though, in 7th place. He is going to stay where he is in 7th. That's just a little bit slower than what he'd managed before. John Payne has still got another lap, and the reason why everybody is pulling over to the right-hand side, of course, is because they only get 2 laps, even though there are 10 minutes in this session. They're only allowed to do 2 laps, and a lot of the drivers have now completed that. John Payne, the only driver now inside the top 15 who have not done those first 2 laps.
Yeah, most drivers will get out there early in qualifying. 10 minutes plenty for an outlap and 2 flying laps of this full Grand Prix configuration of Monza circuit. Oh, John Payne skating the rear around through Ascari, really tipping it in a little bit wide into the final bit where he gets some curb. So he's looking for a lot of time right now.
That was pretty dangerously close to an accident, actually, on the way towards Ascari. He was really out of shape, but he held on well, John Payne, and he might well get a return for it as well. If he's gone well through the rest of the lap as well, he might get return for his bravery. Out of the final corner, he comes and up towards the line. Can he maybe get to 3rd? I think is most realistic, because that's less than a 10th away. Over the line, it's going to be close, and he is going to stay where he is. That was actually an improvement, but it was very, very slight.
You know, Greg Seitz is going even quicker. Barry Hills lost a tiny bit of time, I think, in the first sector, but he's picked it up through the middle of the lap. He's 8th at the moment, coming out of the final corner. For a long, long time known as the Parabolica, a name that describes its shape. Now, Curva Alboreto, which describes a man and not a shape. Greg Seitz goes even quicker at the top there with the pole position time. Here's Richard McClure. Not a difficult name, but I'm making it difficult.
It's, I think he's run out of laps actually here, and McClure. There you go. He's continuing on for the moment, 1.1 seconds off of the pace as things stand, and McClure only making his 2nd appearance of the season, only joined us for last week's race at Mugello. Runs a little bit wide there. We'll get an off track for that in any case here towards the end of this session. Only a couple of drivers now haven't set their times. Wendell Lowe and Richard Columba have yet to set their times. They're the only 2 in the field who've not got any on the board. That will make us 28 cars on the grid here.
So maybe McClure is a big fan of the Italian circuits, Mugello to Monza. A little bit of Italian flag across the rear wing. Is that an old Minardi livery? It's got something going on for it. It's stunning as well. Be able to pick that one out easily throughout the 2 races coming up, as he comes out at the final corner and comes to the timing line 14th as he began that lap.
It's a good lap. I think that would have been good enough for about 7th, by the way. but he's not quite got the opportunity because of the running out of laps. So that's a bit of a shame for him. What was the actual time? 42.5. Yeah, that would have been good enough for 6th place, actually. So he'll be a bit disappointed he managed to do that on his 3rd lap rather than his 2nd. But there you go. Lowe now making his way up towards the line. This is the 2nd of 2 laps for him. And this will be the end of his session. And it's very good, actually. It is going to be up the order into 20th place. So that's a good improvement for him. Richard Columba just come over the line. I don't think he got that lap in, though. He got an off track. He must have done somewhere around the circuit.
Yeah, I'm seeing sign of a few of them picking up off tracks. I think that might have been the case for Richard McClure. Might have been the case for Richard Coulomb on both of his laps. He's the only driver without a qualifying time because the 10 minutes of qualifying comes to an end and the fastest driver was Greg Seitz. He starts from pole position with Ragnar Wisloff joining him on the front row for a 2-wide rolling start. Roberto Catalano and Paul Stump are row number 2. There's John Payne and John Morgan in 5th and 6th. Teammates Gerhardus Jorrison and Barry Hills are 7th and 8th. While Greg Garris is 9th with Ulf Olsen in 10th. Russ Addy is in 11th with Mike McCormick. He's going to start this race from 12th. Todd Scholl in the 13th. Richard McClure in 14th. Saw his qualifying efforts. Jack Turner 15th. Franz Josef Sturm 16th. Steve O'Malley 17th with Ed Benson in 18th. Then Art McEwen and Wendell Lowe in 19th and 20th, Eugene Clark and Peter Hallstrom in 21st and 22nd, JC Hay and Douglas Beasley 23rd and 24th, and then the last drivers with qualifying times were Tom DeSelms, Brian Dodd and Bob Kern. Richard Coulomb can start this race and probably will, but it will be from 28th position. He didn't seem to get qualifying altogether. These are the track conditions, as you can see. Morning time with some long shadows across the track, but the sun is out. A very gentle breeze is blowing. The track surface is 27 degrees Celsius. It will continue to warm up those what look to be Kumo Extra tyres for quite a while through this race, but the teams and drivers will need to make a pit stop. Speaking of teams, it's got its own championship in this league of 60-plus racing adventures.
Yeah, it does. Rust Racing are currently leading the way in that by over 100 points. So Greg Seitz and Mike McCormick are running away with that a little bit. Greg Seitz has furthered that as well by taking the pole position on this race. There is Wisloff, who is alongside. Seitz is in the chrome, if you like, on the right-hand side of that shot there. And he'll be starting on the inside line on the way down in towards turn number 1. Meanwhile, Jack Turner, by the way, and Bob Kern seem to have not gotten onto the back straight in the gridding process. So either they're not going to be starting at all, or hopefully they'll be starting from the end of pit lane. But Richard Cullum is going to be starting. He got onto the back of the field pretty quickly, actually. And so, despite not setting a time, we will get 28 to the start. I just hope we'll get those other two to the end of pit lane and they'll start from the back.
Yeah, correctly pointed out. Jack Turner qualified 15th, Bob Kern qualified 27th, not on the grid. As we get ready for 16 laps of racing in race 1 of 2 tonight for 60-plus racing adventures. On the final bit of the back straight here towards the Parabolica Curva Alboreto. And Greg Seitz, as close as he can to that pace car. It's the Porsche 911 GT3. More safety cars available on iRacing this season. You can even get the BMW M2 CS Racing as a safety car with the light bar on top. But that is not going to matter shortly. When it pulls in, when we get racing for 16 laps, Greg Seitz is the pole sitter. Ragnar Wisloff on his outside at one of the fastest, most slipstream-dependent racetracks there is anywhere to be found. It's a long, fast run down towards the tight turn 1 chicane, and that's what Greg Seitz has in front of him. The green flag in the starter's hands, and waving as Greg Seitz pulls away, gets up to speed, but the slipstreaming already kicks in at this moment as they're looking for tow. They're looking to get in the draft of another car, pick up as much speed as possible down towards turn number 1. John Payne makes a move up into fourth, looking down the inside here. It's going to get super tight, and there's going to be contact for second, third, and fourth. Exactly what Greg Seitz might have wanted from the race lead as he barrels away and away into a comfortable lead.
Well, Catalano is the one who's been shoved off the road there from the top anyway. Roberto Catalano, third place in the championship coming into this race here this afternoon, and I'm afraid even further behind now after that incident that's put him all the way down to nearly the back of the field. Under the bridge they go in towards the second chicane, and Ulf Olsen goes off the road, bouncing over the anti-cut curbs. He'll be back on again, but he will lose out as a result of all that, you would imagine, as the leaders, especially the top three, get away because of the carnage of the opening chicane.
3 into 1 didn't go at the apex of turn number 1 back there. Seitz had just enough of a lead to fend them all off. Some other big gainers on this opening lap have been Barry Hills and Ulf Olsen's up into 7th, but he's battling with Greg Garris, who's side by side with him right now, heading down towards Ascari. Underneath the old banked circuit, looks like Greg Garris stays ahead of Russ Addy there. Olsen dropping back 2 spots on his way towards Ascari, but it is not over yet by any means.
Certainly not. Down in towards Parabarca, he's going to be hung out to dry a little bit there. When you're out of the slipstream there, you can be going backwards pretty quickly. Down the inside, meanwhile, goes Olsen. Oh dear, big contact and a big crash for Russ Addy as well. There wasn't very much of a touch, but it's resulted in disastrous consequences for Russ Addy, who's hit the wall at very high speed.
It's Roberto Catalano, John Payne and Russ Addy both on pit lane now with lap 1 damages. Ulf Olsen and Mike McCormick heading side by side down towards turn 1. Big stop, big braking zone here. Olsen down the inside just gets ahead. That wheel-to-wheel contact earlier. A little bit of a half spin in the background for one of the other drivers there. So see JC Hay dropping a spot or 2. Plenty of action in the opening lap. Greg Seitz now with a 2.3 second lead, and this is that opening lap action. Was there ever really all that much room there for John Payne?
It was a tight squeeze. It was 3 wide already on the way in towards turn 1, and they both had to go down pit lane as a result. Catalano and John Payne. Russ Addy obviously is in pit lane as well. And Peter Hallstrom has come in as well, although he's back out again, as is Bob Kern, who's made a stop there. Although I think that's actually starting from pit lane, isn't it? But anyway, Hallstrom certainly came in to pit lane at the end of the opening lap. McCormick versus McClure is going on in towards the. In fact, that's Olsen versus McCormick, I should say. This is what happened to Hallstrom through the Ascari. I mentioned you don't want to be up on the curbs, and that's why. Oh dear, he's got a very damaged suspension there.
He gets checked up behind the others, and where does that suspension damage occur? Is it across the curbs, or was it from a tap in front?
I think it was from a tap in the rear, actually, as he was slowing down in front. This is what happened to Russ Addy. Small contact, but look at that, a huge smack on the wall, and that's going to be a very long repair for him. He's still in the session, and he's got his fast repair done, so he's towed back. He's got his fast repair, and he's back out again on the circuit, but that was a big crash. Yeah, I think for Hallstrom, he was hitting the rear as he was checking up to those ahead, as he was saying. He was hitting the rear at the time, so that's what happened there, I think, as McCormick versus Olsen goes on into the first corner. McCormick in the chrome goes through into 8th place.
Quite a few little groups forming, as you expect at Monza in a car like this. When the slipstreaming kicks in and then it's difficult to get away, the other driver can immediately fight right back, which is what Ulf Olsen will do towards the second chicane, getting ahead of Mike McCormick. Jim Cure and Todd Scholl are the drivers watching on. And you've got one lap down car in there somewhere. In this group, there's some other groups as well, like Art McHugh and Wendell Lowe and Steve O'Malley, Eugene Clark, Jack Turner and JC Hay. And also Paul Stump beginning to catch Ragnar Wisloff for second place. Can't yet catch Greg Seitz for the lead. Still a pit stop coming up for all of them in this race though.
It certainly is. And so still plenty of laps still to come in this race as well, which is certainly going to change this, but Seitz has got out to such a big lead because of everything that went on lap 1, that his lead is looking very secure at the moment. It is going to be a battle for second we'll watch later on perhaps, and certainly for 4th place and further behind we'll be watching eagerly as well. Through turn 3 they go, and back out onto the front straight again. Barry Hills leading the way in this one for 4th place, ahead of John Morgan and Gerhardus Jorasson, who's in 6th place. Doing a little bit of weaving around Barry Hills. You can see exactly why, because of those two right in behind him. And so far, it's been effective. He's just about going to hang on towards turn 1, and his teammate Jorasson gets close but doesn't go for it.
No, they might have something up their sleeve for later on. McCormick getting on the radio to warn Ulf Olsen not to block. So that's going to be a spicy battle the whole way through. 8th, 9th, 10th. That group back there a little bit further behind what's happening here with Anglo-Dutch Racing sandwiching John Morgan in the 4th, 5th and 6th spots here. See Olsen just in the background, a shot there as well as they work through the second chicane. Who's been a big gainer so far this race? I think it's been Richard Coulomb.
I think so, yeah, as far as biggest mover forward goes by some distance. 12 positions gained up to 16th, but rather on his own just for the moment. Has just passed Eugene Clark and has got a bit of work to do to catch up to the group led by Art McEwen in 13th place at the moment. There they are on the left-hand side. 12 positions gained for Coulomb, which is a very good start indeed. Hills again weaving around on the way down towards the final corner, and John Morgan not going anywhere, not doing anything to try and overtake him. Gerhardus Jorasson now is going to be the one trying to apply the pressure. As you mentioned, these two are teammates, Hills and Jorasson, and so surely they'll try and work together to overhaul John Morgan in some way, and Jorasson is closer this time round than he was last. This time in towards turn 1, there's going to be a chance surely as he goes down the middle of the road. He's going to have the inside line, and Morgan doesn't seem to be fighting him too hard initially, although he does break rather late. He will give up the position eventually, and now the teammates are running together in 4th and 5th.
Yeah, absolutely textbook, able to follow very closely through Curva El Barreto, and then now right in behind his teammate, who hopefully he can run with here. And the drivers now 4th and 5th can make a little bit of progressing. A couple more pit stops happen, like Todd Scholl, Jack Turner, JC Hay. Pit stops in the range of 5 seconds or so, but you can get a lot of fuel in. Apparently about 15 litres of fuel into the car in that time frame. Here's Steve O'Malley, the United Colours of Benetton, just dropping behind Wendell Lowe, who's gained 7 positions in this race so far. One of a few new drivers this race or this season, and as we like to say, Ewan O'Leary. More people turn 60. More people turn 60 every day.
Oh, okay. I didn't know what you were going to say there, but yeah.
It would have been very instructive for me if you'd gone and put words in my mouth that you think I say all the time, holding up a mirror to me.
It would have been quite impressive as well if I could just read what was going to happen next, but I haven't quite perfected that yet. McCormick has gotten down the inside here into the final corner, into 9th place, and that's Richard McClure going backwards. Ed Benson's in the red just at the back of this as well. So McCormick has just dropped a couple of positions from where he was at the very height of the early part of this race, but he's regaining some of those now up to 9th place.
How about a little pass in the grass action? Around the outside goes Richard McClure on the front straight and ahead before the braking zone of the first chicane, which he pulls up for just nicely. So, wow. A move to be sure. McClure ahead of Mike McCormick there. Rather spectacular fashion. McCormick was expecting to see him in the other mirror and then went, hang on, he's passing me there? Okay.
Yeah, and in towards the second chicane. McClure is going to hang on, and then through the next couple of corners you'd expect so again. So this is more like the kind of racing that you'd expect from Monza, really. Slipstream playing a big role, moves down in towards the chicanes playing a big role as well, as always. Oh, but mistakes present as well. No room for mistakes really around this circuit. McCormick's just made one there though, by the looks of things, and he could be under pressure from some of those behind, although the gaps are suggesting that
you've got a lap down battle.
Yeah.
Roberto Catalano and John Payne, two incredibly competent drivers who qualified inside of the top 5 there, have both had to take spare cars. Both ended up a lap down, and therefore right back where they were, but hopefully with less dramatics and fireworks than lap 1 gave us when these two collided. John Payne looks down the inside of Roberto Catalano in good time this time around, and so there are battles all the way through the field. Even as we play through some of these pit stops, you're going to see far more drivers pulling to pit entry this lap and the next. Mike McCormick will be one of them. The pit lane speed limit here at Monza on the Grand Prix layout being 80 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, so just under the halfway mark. There isn't technically a halfway mark as far as laps are concerned, I suppose, at 17, but we're getting towards that stage now. And there is his teammate, Greg Seitz, running around at the front of the field, continuing to extend his margin at the front as well. If he can do the same in race 2, he will certainly extend his championship margin, but even at the moment, he's looking very likely to do so, because the pressure that John Payne is going to be under through the second race, considering he's down in 26th at the moment for the first race, is going to be immense pressure for him. So Greg Seitz in prime position here to extend his championship lead from 30 points to a few more.
Yeah, really fortunate off that start that he got out of the first chicane with a lead of more than a second and a half, and a couple of the very competent drivers behind him unfortunately tangling as John Payne got in a little bit late, I think, to get his nose down the inside of what was already a 2-wide battle. And that set Greg Seitz free to the lead of over 6 seconds that he currently has. You've now got to be absolutely perfect with your pit stop and your pit lane, not just perfect with your racing laps like he's been so far. Coming to the end of lap 7. Oh, that's Mike McCormick. Not how you take that second chicane.
No, and importantly as well, because he needed some good outlaps here to try and get some of those places he couldn't on the circuit, but that is not going to help. He just broke a little bit too late for the second chicane, bobbled over the curbs on the outside line, spun around a little bit into the gravel, and that was that for McCormick. So very interesting indeed. That is disappointing, because he would have hoped that this run, if you like, outside of the normal confines of a battle would have helped him, but actually he may well have consigned himself to staying behind the likes of Olsen, who was stuck behind earlier.
Seeing just a couple more pit stops and expecting a few more soon. Here's McClure coming out of the pit lane, just in behind Tom DeSalms.
Yeah, but look at how far he's ahead of McCormick. Those two were battling earlier. The gap now 6-7 seconds, so that's how costly the mistake has been.
Yeah, McClure is the best running car to have stopped at this point, so it has worked out well for him. Everyone in front of him, including DeSalms, hasn't stopped yet. Includes your race leader Greg Seitz, Ragnar Wisloff in second, and Paul Stump in third.
Yeah, it's not brilliant news that DeSalms has not stopped in front, not because he's not particularly because of the fact he's not stopped, but the fact he's in the way at the moment, DeSalms, or could be in the next few moments. So that still will be the concern for Richard McClure, if indeed it gets to that stage, as race leader Greg Seitz comes in as close to halfway as you can get in this race. Mitch McClure, though, is going to be slowed down by DeSalms, and you wonder whether that will just hold him a little bit in his battle. Oh, it will! He's hit the back of Tom DeSalms there, and that will certainly end his charge for a top 10 finish.
I think I saw the front wing go, and there was maybe a little bit of damage for DeSalms there as well. So just like what you thought, not what either driver really needed there. Out of the pit lane we go. John Morgan goes one lap longer into the race lead. Greg Seitz comes out still ahead of Ragnar Wisloff, who's still ahead of Paul Stump. Nothing unusual really to be spotted out of any of these pit stops just yet.
Yeah, let's see what happens down towards turn 1 with McClure and DeSalms. I mean, McClure is going to carry on. Maybe it's just visual rather than anything too much to worry about on circuit. Ed Benson couldn't quite get past Mike McCormick despite his mistake into the second chicane, so that's just the amount of margin that the 99 had over Benson before this pit stop. and clearly that hasn't really affected this this position for McCormick. He's just a lot further behind than he was before, as Jesse Helms now is under pressure from Todd Scholl in 11th place.
Just two cars that haven't stopped at this point. John Morgan out in front, and Tom DeSelms with the Prost GP livery being tailed by Braun GP livery. Todd Scholl right there. Scholl will look to the inside of the Ascari chicane and not fall victim of what tripped up Richard McClure earlier, as we do get John Morgan pitting. Douglas Beasley spun around at the first chicane, and so this is going to put Greg Seitz back into the perfect position at the lead of the race once again.
5 seconds for Morgan. That's pretty much on course with everybody else. So now these two, the Anglo-Dutch racing team, make their way towards the first corner. They're back into the top 5, or they would have hoped so. I thought it was going to be easier than that. John Morgan just gets out behind them though, couldn't quite get out in between or ahead of them. And so Barry Hills and Gerhardus Jorgensen's working together has just about worked out there, and this battle for fourth will continue on by the looks of things, the battle for the highest position in the field. And so John Morgan not quite able to get involved, even though his pit stop and his in-lap seemed to be right around the mark.
Yeah, long blend from the pit exit down towards turn 1, and the drivers that are already on the front straight are at such high speed. Speeds as high as 265 kilometers an hour if some of this information is to be believed. So it is a long straight at high speed, and Barry Hills and Gerhardus Jorgensen had just enough of it to pip John Morgan to turn 1 before he could get up to speed. He's placed well here for the remaining laps, so I think if he can pick them off just a little bit, and they're not all that far behind Paul Stump, who's flying solo at the moment, having dropped a few seconds behind Ragnar Wisloff after the pit stops. For a moment in the early phase of the race, those two maybe could have gone together. And Greg Seitz has 6.3 second lead.
He's easily in control of this race at the moment, even though Wisloff is starting to sort of keep pace with him, if you like. It doesn't really matter when you start with a 6-second head start if you keep pace with the driver up ahead of you. This is going to be on in towards turn 1 though. John Morgan's pretty close to Jorgensen, who's going to be getting slipstream from his teammate, so he needs to time this right, Morgan. He can't get alongside too early, otherwise he will just see Jorgensen slowly eke away from him, but he has timed this quite well. He's just losing a bit of speed towards the end of the straight, but oh, not quite. He just lose too much. I thought he was going to stay alongside and have the chance to break late on the inside, but he didn't quite, and he will stay in 6th place. This is going to be a problem for Morgan. The fact that these two are just going to help each other with slipstream could make it very difficult.
Yeah, for those reasons you pointed out, it became a little low percentage for John Morgan, and he went, nope, here I am in 6th, and it can wait and maybe look for a mistake or a more convincing opportunity to pass there. So he just held off on that one for the moment.
Anything he can do, to be honest. 6 laps to go at the end of this one. I don't see how he's going to be able to do this. Maybe he's going to have to wait for an error of some sort, but it's so difficult to overcome somebody who's got slipstream.
Ascari chicane just catching glimpses of Paul Stump. Barry Hills will have a good view of the podium there. He's got a good view of the right-hand side of the racetrack as well. It's an interesting tactic to not give slipstream to your own teammate.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I didn't really see the point of that, certainly with Jorgensen not following him around. Maybe they were trying to coordinate something, but I couldn't really see the plan myself. Now he's pulling to the right-hand side again. Jorgensen, for whatever reason, is not following his teammate. And, well, if he continues to do that, then John Morgan's task could be a bit easier, but he's nowhere near close enough this time.
Yeah, interesting, and it raises the question, what is the best way to manage it? A little bit of a lock-up tyre smoke into the chicane there. A couple laps in a row, not quicker than Paul Stump, from what I can tell. So 142.5 for Stump up ahead, so 142.8 for this group, and they end up 0.3 of a second behind, as their pace right now is predicated on what pace Barry Hills can do. Gehardas Jorissen's not really getting all of the slipstream, not passing him, not leapfrogging, just staying in line.
Yeah, he's doing all he can at the moment as they go through the two fast right-handers. More technical part of this circuit, although there aren't many of them. And then the run up towards Ascari again. Further behind, Greg Garris is lurking, but he's not really getting that much closer. Certainly not as quickly as he would need to if he seriously wanted to be involved in this battle. And so I think he's just going to stay at a distant 7th place. But these three are going to continue to run around like this. What's Barry Hills going to do here? He's going to weave. He's almost breaking the slipstream from his own teammate, which does seem a little bit weird.
I almost thought you'd want to stay in the slipstream and just lift the throttle rather than do that. But again, I'm not exactly sure what the best way to manage it would be. It's 5 laps to go in race 1 of 2 for 60 plus racing adventures from Autodromo Nazionale Monza, so says the billboard. Just Monza in some of the material. Again, this breaking the toe too wide Anglo-Dutch racing situation heads down towards the turn 1 chicane. These drivers here in 4th, 5th and 6th. Group brewing between 14th and 17th, led by Jack Turner at the moment. And the most positions gained by anyone, Richard Coulomb, is at the tail of that one. And Ross Addy, with drama early in this race and some long repairs, is starting to cut through a few of the drivers in the tail of the field, so he's making some passes right now at this stage.
Yeah, but those who've made 2 stops through damage or through starting in the pit lane are at the back of the field by some distance. The bottom 7 are 20 seconds ahead or behind, I should say, of the top 21 as things stand. So I think there's going to be a very hard limit as to what Rosati and the rest of them can actually get out of this race. John Morgan, meanwhile, gets a very good run out of Lesmo 2, and suddenly they're under pressure here, and Jorissen's not going to get the slipstream from his teammate. I'm not sure whether Barry Hills has not seen his mirrors or whether or what's going on there, to be honest, but John Morgan's been getting the slipstream, and he's gone round the outside towards Ascari. An impressive overtake in the end, but Jorissen might well be asking questions of his teammate.
Yeah, I'm going to ask some questions as well. Like, wouldn't you move across to quote-unquote break the toe in that situation? But no, apparently not. John Morgan gets in between, gets in the middle. If he's got a little bit of pace to show, he could then come at Barry Hills here, see if he can move up into 4th. Once again, they're not as quick as Paul Stump in 3rd. Ragnar Wisloff might need to save a little bit. His pace has dropped away just slightly as Paul Stump has improved. Stump could get back within the toe of Ragnar Wisloff for 2nd place, neither of them quite catching Greg Seitz, who's extending his lead of the race. And this 2nd stint after the pit stop, it's looking good for John Morgan.
It certainly is. I thought it would be almost impossible to get into the middle of these 2 teammates actually now and start to disrupt, but actually he's found it pretty easy. A little bit of a lack of communication there. As I said, Jack, down the back straight, I'm not sure Barry Hills quite realised what was going on behind him, because you don't often see such big runs created off of Lesmo 2, but he actually managed to do it there, Morgan. And he got through, because Hills was taking what you would describe as the normal racing line down this straight when you're sort of sizing yourself up for Ascari. But in the end, that gave the slipstream to Morgan when he really should have been to the left, giving it to Jorissen. Whether that would have made any difference or not, because the run Morgan got remains to be seen, and we'll never know really. But there will certainly be questions asked, perhaps, of Hills at the end of this one. Now he weaves around again, but Morgan not really interested in chasing him either, as he focuses on defending from Jorissen.
Yeah, slipstream is, I mean, it's powerful in any car at Monza. That's what we know about Monza, but it seems like it's very powerful for these Super Formula Lights. It hasn't been used to its full effect or optimized in this battle for the moment. Gehardas Jorissen, now it works out in his favor, and he gets back ahead of John Morgan as they begin lap 15, heading down towards turn number 1. Battle between 4th, 5th and 6th. 3 more laps to go.
I wonder how Barry Hills is managing to do this at the moment, just staying easily ahead of the others, seemingly, whereas these two are exchanging places. All of a sudden they're losing time as well as they run quite wide through the Curva Grande, and now, well, Morgan was having a look at the inside, but he was never going to do that. So, yeah, it's interesting. The slipstream so important for these two in 5th and 6th, but seemingly Hills is not being put under any pressure here for whatever reason, despite the fact he's the only one in this group without any slipstream.
Interesting indeed. Field seems to have been spread a little bit by the pit stops. Was completely clean from the green flag. You might expect the tow to give us a couple more battles and packs inside of the top 10. It's just this for the moment, and then a lot of those early damaged drivers trying to cut their way back through.
This is Steve O'Malley, who's at the head of the group for 14th place, but not all that much happening outside this this group of 3 actually. So we've not been missing much further down as we go on to the penultimate lap now, lap 16 of 70 in this opening race, and suddenly Morgan is a little bit detached from the back of this group. Hills and Jorgensen on top of each other nearly in towards turn number 1. Jorgensen having a look, but he's never going to go for that on his teammate. And hopefully now they can get the teamwork together so that they can both finish inside the top 5.
Yep, so Greg Seitz still leading, approaching a 10-second lead to Ragnar Wisloff, who's managed to find a little bit more pace just now, keeping himself clear of Paul Stump. Paul Stump's pace has been enough to see Barry Hills, Gerhardus Jorgensen and John Morgan get smaller in his mirror. Greg Garris runs in 7th, Wolf Olsen in 8th, Todd Scholl in 9th, and Mike McCormick in 10th. Richard Coulomb with 11 positions gained, had no qualifying time, started from almost the very, very back. So he's got the most positions gained in this race. Probably wouldn't have wanted to have started all the way back there if he had his way though.
And towards Ascari again for these 3, and Jorgensen still just tracing the Hills line, and now we'll get very close towards the final corner, and you'd imagine have just managed to secure this top 5, but we'll see. He weaves out there, he hasn't got to slow down, he's just giving himself a bit of vision on the way towards the final corner. And now the best chance really on the circuit for Morgan, although he's a bit far back, he's still too far back. It's the long run down towards turn 1. It doesn't look like he's going to get this chance on the final lap.
Yeah, Greg Garrison and Ulf Olsen getting a little bit closer in the background as well, as it's one more lap of Monza for this opening race. Some drivers might need to manage their fuel a little bit. If they fueled a tiny bit short at their pit stop, they needed to take between 12 and 15 litres. If you're one of the drivers who took closer to 12 than 15, you might be looking at this final lap going, how much do I want to coast across the finish line if I'm in a battle like this one with Barry Hills and Gerhardus Jorgensen, despite not tangoing perfectly, stepping on each other's toes just slightly, seem to have been able to keep John Morgan in a position where he can't maximise the opportunity of trying to make 2 passes for 1.
Yeah, I thought once he got in the middle of these 2 that he might be able to push on and get 4th, but actually Morgan has struggled to really harness that chance, and so it's going to be 6th place, I think, although there are still a few corners to go, including for the race leader, of course, Greg Seitz, who is about 15, 16 seconds ahead of these guys, and he's about to take another race win this season, guaranteeing himself maximum points with the opening race victory in this afternoon's races.
The championship leader looks to make good on what he's done all season long, and he takes the win, the first race from pole position at Monza from Ragnar Wisloff and Paul Stump. Greg Seitz with another win, extending the championship lead for him. Barry Hills, Gerhardus Jorgensen and John Morgan work their way through the Parabolica for the final time. Checkered flag comes up pretty early out of the final corner. The timing line's just there with Stripe. Once the track straightens up out of the Parabolica, you can make a pass from the final corner to the checkered flag, but it's not going to happen. In that battle, you might have to look elsewhere, like Wendell Lowe and Steve O'Malley here, 14th and 14th. O'Malley looking around the outside of the Parabolica on Lowe. And who can be the best off this corner is all that matters. So down the inside, Wendell Lowe gets a little bit of track position. Steve O'Malley gets better traction, cuts back underneath. But I think as they both get to full power, Wendell Lowe just holds on to that one. Steve O'Malley might have thought he had a fighting chance to pip him to the line for 13th. Jack Turner finished 15th there. Clark and Coolum behind. Last driver that we're going to see cross the checkered flag is going to be Art McEwen, I think, as JC Hay and behind have gone a lap down.
Yep, there's the results.
Greg Seitz from Ragnar Wisloff from Paul Stump. The battling inside of the top 10 was delivered by Barry Hills, Gerhardus Jorrison and John Morgan. That kept battling. Greg Garris might have had a sniff. Ulf Olsen in 8th with Todd Scholl and Mike McCormick. Top 10. And then was Richard McClure, Ed Benson, Wendell Lowe and Steve O'Malley, less than a tenth of a second in there between those two if you look at the numbers. Jack Turner, Eugene Clark, Richard Coolum, JC Hay, Tom DeSelms and Brian Dodd to 20th. Last drivers on the lead lap were Franz Joseph Stummett, Bob Kern and Art McEwen. And then Russ Addy, Peter Hostrom, John Payne, Roberto Catalano and Douglas Beasley were all 1 or 2 laps down, but that means that basically everyone finished, and they've still got one more race of Monza to come up a little bit later on with race 1 finished. Ewan, we can speak to a couple of our drivers.
Absolutely. Ragnar Wisloff joining us after finishing second in that opening race. Ragnar, welcome to the booth. Good to have you with us. Second place for you in that race, about 9.5 seconds off of Greg Seitz. Was there anything you could have done to catch the race leader in that one?
I don't think so, Ewan. It's it's Greg Seitz. It's difficult to catch him. He's typically 5/10 quicker than me, so I'm struggling usually to keep up with him. And I don't know. I was just looking at what happened in turn 1. Not sure. I think it was maybe a little bit of net code there, so I think I was a bit lucky not to be caught up in anything. I tried to give some space, but maybe I didn't give enough. Maybe that was my fault.
Well, just tell us what you saw in towards turn 1, because you were, I think, on the outside, if I remember correctly, trying to avoid everything. Tell us what you saw at the time before you looked at the replays, and what you felt about it at the time before you looked at the replays.
As we were going down the start-finish straight, Greg cut over, and so I was in the slipstream, but Roberto was even more in the slipstream, so he went up on the inside. I didn't know where Payne was, but I saw Roberto, so I think we were going about side by side into the turn, and I tried to turn in late and give some space on the inside. And then as we came out of the chicane, I just saw there was a huge gap, so I understood something must have happened. I'm not quite sure, but as I said, I didn't have any X, so I figured I didn't feel anything, so I thought that I was in the clear, but I have to look at it again.
Yeah, it's going to be one that's going to be talked about, I'm sure. Well, congratulations on finishing second place, regardless. Good luck for the second race that's coming up, practice opening in about just over 10 minutes' time. And thanks for coming to chat to us as well.
Thanks, Ewan. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Ragnar Wisloff there, second place in the opening race at Monza tonight.
Yeah, by all accounts, we don't have first and third to speak to us at the moment. I've spoken to Greg Seitz before for sure. Don't know if I've ever spoken to Paul Stump before. Maybe they are deep in their preparations for race number 2. That one is going to come up shortly here on RaceSpotTV. The drivers get a little break and then they lock and load to do it all again. A fresh qualifying session, a fresh grid, and a fresh race for race 2. Plenty of drivers looking to make an improvement there. Drivers like Russ Addy, John Payne, Roberto Catalano, and others who could be a threat for the podium in race number 2. You'll have to stick around to wait and see. buzzer for race 2 of 60 plus racing adventures. Race 1 was high speed, high action. Drivers are gearing up to qualify to set the grid for race number 2. Can correct sights go back to back? Can some of the drivers who tangled turn 1, lap 1 make it through cleanly for a better result? Well, we're all about to find out here on RaceSpotTV. David Haynes with Ewan O'Leary, the 60 plus racing adventures Super Formula Lights at Monza.
Yeah, it was a good opening race, and looking forward to the second one now, qualifying just underway for it. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting with Greg Seitz already having banked the points for winning. Can he win again to ensure that he gains points on absolutely everybody here in this round of the championship, as he has done throughout most of the season so far over his nearest rivals like John Payne, who hasn't gained points on him in a single round this season, and that is going to continue here through round 6 as well. So a pretty big race for him coming up as well, but especially for John Payne, considering he finished outside the top 20. But yeah, we'll see how similar or not this race is compared to the last one, and see if we get a different outcome this time round.
So having a look at Greg Garris, as he continues his outlap, still not into the first of the 2 flying laps, but trying to get some temperature into those tyres. As they start pretty cold, will be pretty important. Drivers will continue to find more speed, more grip as the laps went on throughout race number 1. So the same will be true of qualifying, that lap 1 will have more grip than the outlap, lap 2 will have more grip than lap 1. Plenty of other drivers out on track doing similar right now. Wonder what Greg Seitz might do this time around as well.
Yeah, he is out on the track pretty much immediately here, as are most of the drivers. JC Hay, Barry Hills and Wendell Lowe at the moment are the only ones who are not out on the circuit, so we'll be watching them later, I suppose, as they do their laps behind everybody else. But we'll go on board to have a little look at what it's like to go quickly round here. This is Greg Garris in the Bourne GP inspired livery. I've been enjoying some of these Formula 1 inspired liveries, by the way, from years gone by. It's in towards turn 1, late on the brakes, just at the 100-metre mark or so, over the right-hand side curve, just to open up the left-hander and get a good exit through here as well. So many of these corners are about to run onto the straight that comes immediately after these traction zones.
Yeah, and Greg Garris did a good job of that. And he also didn't look particularly out of control, remembering that the second lap is really where you're probably going to do your best work. This is about making sure you get a good enough banker time in and you continue preparing the tyres for lap number 2. Difficult thing to do is he washes a little bit wide through the first Lesmo corner, but nails the second one, so you can continue to build on that from there down the hill now to pick up more speed, duck underneath part of the old banking that you can race on iRacing, and then back up to the Ascari chicane. Once again, you're running out of here, super critical. So, kind of like this, full throttle, planted through there and heading towards the Parabolica.
Yeah, sorry for the funny noises in the background. I thought he was going to be sliding straight off at Ascari, then he threw it in so hard. He was just letting the rear slide a little bit, but it was well controlled. And now he makes his way into this final corner. He braked quite late again, using the rear to get it turned a little bit there, letting it just slip away from him, but knowing it's going to come back to him again. Pretty good driving from Greg Garris here. Let's see what the lap time return is going to be, as John Payne sets the benchmark of a 42.1, I should say. That was very quick, and it's not been equalled by anybody. Garris himself goes to 3rd.
More times rushing in, more change as we go. Gerhardus Jorgensen to 2nd, Roberto Catalano to 3rd, Todd Scholl. We're watching through the final corner here. These cars, so much grip that they don't look troubled by the second half of the Parabolica. It looks easy. Todd Scholl brings it back across to the racing line and goes to 2nd on his first lap. It's these next laps that are going to really count, including for drivers like John Morgan. His first effort has taken him to 6th. He's looking to improve on this one, and it looks pretty aggressive, and it looks pretty stuck through the first Lesmo there, as well as he uses all the track that you can.
Yeah, what's noticeable about this session so far is that it's slower than the first one. So the pole time was about 41.8, 41.9, something like that. We did get into the high 41s, but we're nowhere near that at the moment for most of the drivers. John Payne is the only one who's anywhere near. It is closer, though, generally, from second place down to 13th. We've got 12 cars separated by less than a second. That is something we didn't see through the opening part of the afternoon. So it is a bit of a different session, this one, compared to the one that we saw earlier on in the day, especially with Greg Seitz in 6th place. It'll be interesting to see how he jumps up from there.
About to see some second flying laps, like from John Payne. Currently is at the top, and he puts another 0.3 of a second in. That's a benchmark for absolutely everyone else if they want to start up front. John Morgan moves a little bit, but some others are jumping ahead of him. Mike Grandy jumps into second. Here is Greg Seitz, pole sitter and race winner of race number 1, 7th after his first flying lap right now. Roberto Catalano goes up into 3rd. Get good tabs on this time from Greg Seitz, but it is a monstrous one, 141.6, as he goes all the way to the top.
Great lap from Seitz. John Payne went quicker than Seitz went in the first qualifying, and so Seitz has outdone himself here to get what looks like pole. Rizloff will go 3rd with that time. That was a 41.9, so the pace after a very slow, comparatively, first lap, the pace has really picked up in the second, and it seems everyone is just warmed up a little bit compared to where they were in the first session, because these are quicker times. Seitz there with a 41.6, I'd imagine, will be very, very difficult to beat.
Yeah, no one's got any sectors better than him on laps that they're doing right now. JC Hay with some personal best, Peter Holstrom with some personal best. Hay is one of the last drivers we're going to see him, and Wendell Lowe. Haven't had Barry Hills out on track just yet. Final corner for JC Hay on lap number 2. Currently 17th. Looking to improve, and will to 16th.
Yeah, that's a good improvement for him. Good place for him to be. 16th to start off with. Greg Seitz still going on, but he's done his 2 laps now, and I think he's going quicker, actually. Wendell Lowe is the only driver left to set his lap time here. Barry Hills isn't going to, by the looks of things. Hopefully he gets into the race. Ed Benson, I'm afraid, has messed up both of his laps, so he will not be going anywhere in this one. He'll be starting at the back as Seitz makes his way up towards the line. He's just showing off at this point. Where's he going to get to? Not quite as quick, but that would be good enough for pole again if he was doing it for the first time.
Yes, Wendell Lowe's gone around a couple times, and none of the lap times have counted. Ed Benson, similarly. Barry Hills we haven't seen out on track. We've had 2 drivers whose lap times just flat out haven't counted. A couple of ways that can happen. You cut too much of the chicanes, or I think it seems a few drivers were very much tempting fate with running wide out of the Lesmo corners as well, and those right-handers on the exit are pretty strictly enforced, I feel.
Yep. It's certainly difficult to contend with. You've got to be very, very careful on the outsides of these corners. You can get off tracks pretty easily. I wouldn't be surprised if more of these drivers had one of their laps wiped away because of that. There are the track conditions, by the way. 20 past 10 in the morning, 15th of April, so springtime. Looks like exactly the same conditions, so I think it's not a case of the conditions getting faster for these drivers, but actually these drivers just getting their eye in a little bit. Don't forget, at the start of these 2 sessions, in the first of these 2 sessions, it's just a 20-minute practice session from 2:30 in the afternoon Eastern time. So that's not very long to get your eye in. These guys have had a whole 17-lap race as well as that practice, and now 2 qualifying sessions as well. So they've very much gotten used to this circuit. They very much know their way around now, and that's, I think, why they've managed to go that little bit quicker.
From what I can tell, with a minute left, Greg Seitz, literally the only driver still out on track. Not sure he's really trying to set super competitive lap times out there either. So we had 21 drivers set qualifying times, 2 try to and not succeed, and 1 not try. John Payne's first sector was better than Greg Seitz's from his pole lap. So John Payne, through the first chicane and then around Curva Grande, was quicker than Greg Seitz, but Greg Seitz had him beat absolutely everywhere else around the lap. So the second chicane, the Lesmo, Zascari, Parabolica, all of that was advantage Greg Seitz as he took the pole time with a 1:41.6 to John Payne, who starts second, Ragnar Wisloff, who starts third, Mike Grandy's up there in fourth with Roberto Catalano in fifth and Todd Scholl in sixth. There's seventh place, Gerhardus Jorison with Ulf Olsen in eighth, Russ Addy ninth, Greg Garris 10th, John Morgan 11th, and Mike McCormick 12th. Richard McClure in 13th, Francis Stum 14th, Peter Holstrom, JC Hay, Eugene Clark, and Art McEwen is the top 18. Other three drivers with qualifying times: Douglas Beasley, Tom DeSelms, and Jan-Erik Skrefsrud, who I don't think we saw in race number one.
No.
He's qualified 21st for race number 2. Ed Benson and Wendell Lowe went out and had disallowed times. Barry Hills didn't go out at all. And here we are to make the grid for the rolling start. There's Ragnar, that is Ragnar Wisloff back there. But Greg Seitz and John Payne are going to be the front row.
Yeah, that's Payne in number 2. There's the chrome car of Greg Seitz on the left-hand side of the road. And Wisloff, who's just in behind Payne there, and Mike Grandy as well. You mentioned further down, Jan-Erik Skrefsrud, who's in for the first time. I don't believe Mike Grandy did the first race either, unless I'm mistaken. So there's been a couple of drivers joining in. That's the beauty of having two different sessions in this series, is that you can join the second race if you miss the first, because practice opens an hour and 20 for the second race after it does for the first. So if that suits you, your afternoon, then you can join in for the second race and there's no worries, and you don't really lose out on points either, because as I mentioned earlier, it is your best result only that is carried forward towards the points table.
Yep, indeed, correct. Often makes the point scoring very interesting. If you can win both races, then you can lock out your rivals from scoring the maximum points. But things can remain very close if you and your rival take one race win apiece. Both would walk away from a round like this with equal points. Happens quite often at the start of the season, that after round 1 there are 2 drivers on equal points. Greg Seitz is starting from pole, 2 races in a row. Pace car at 97 kilometers an hour, leading them along towards the Parabolica. Greg Seitz knows what works from pole position. John Payne starting a little higher up the order for this second race than he did for race number 1. Roberto Catalano from 5th. Probably has his fingers and his toes crossed and whatever other superstitions he has, because he did not have a clean race 1 despite his great qualifying pace. We didn't get a good look at what Catalano can do on home soil. Just letting the pace car get a little further ahead towards the pit entry. Drivers also all have a better idea about what to do about their fuel economy and their fuel strategy in this second race as well. Getting ready for a green flag. Greg Seitz is going. John Payne's trying to go with him. It's a good start from the second row of Ragnar Wisloff and Mike Grandy. As already Seitz moves across to one side. He moves across to the other. Catalano alongside Todd Scholl, all heading down towards turn 1. A little bit of 3 wide back there as well, with Russ Addy gaining some spots. Russ Addy so deep on the brakes. John Payne almost runs up the back of Greg Seitz for the race lead, but Seitz is through clean to another race lead.
Yeah, but he's not quite got the gap that he did last time, because John Payne's had a much better run through turn 1. Last race, he made contact on the inside line with Catalano, and they were both significantly delayed. In fact, the entire field was quite significantly delayed after that accident. But now they are very much in a race here. Payne versus Seitz. Down in towards the chicane. Oh, that's too late on the brakes from Grandy and Catalano, who go across the chicane.
Gerhardus Jorison also with issues in the braking zone into the second chicane, so that's the one that's bitten them all in the second race. Catalano back on the racetrack. tight line into the first Lesmo, washing out in the second part. Ross Addy gaining 4 spots so far on this lap. Roberto Catalano has lost 7. He's still trying to get back on his feet. And did he get too much of that curb when he missed the chicane? Is his car damaged? Or can he get back into this one? Looks like Mike Grandy and Russ Addy battling it out now. Addy's gotten in front. Grandy's all over the dirt and the dust through Ascari, and he's going to be on the back foot again as Ulf Olsen now picks him off.
Yeah, far too deep into the corner there from Grandy. I thought he was going quickly, and it turned out he was going too quickly. Straight into the gravel and straight back through again goes Olsen. Further behind, that was Garris under a little bit of pressure from McClure, McCormick and Catalano, who's trying to work his way back through again. By the way, Jurgensen's on his own in this race. Unfortunately, Barry Hills has got technical problems and so is not joining in for this one, as Catalano and Grandy both have to come into pit lane.
Yeah, they might have picked up some damage somewhere along. No meatball flag for them. Gerhardus Jorgensen's the only driver with the meatball flag. He's about to pit in. Bit of a lock up there, just behind as McClure gets ahead of Greg Garris. Biggest movers in this race so far are Richard McClure and Ed Benson. So there's been a good one for McClure. He's up into 8th now. Looks like he just dispatched with Greg Garris as well.
Yep. As they make their way down in towards the chicane again, second chicane, settling in on lap 2 for Garris, who was at the front of a train really on the way towards the second or the final corner of the last lap, but he's got himself back together again now as Ed Benson moves into the 16th place. He is the biggest move forward so far. 6 places gained for him after getting both of his qualifying laps wrong. That was a replay of Jorgensen, I think, in towards the second chicane.
Yes, definitely making contact with the rear of the car in front. And then looking to carry on. Peter Holstrom in behind Franz Josef Sturm. Good battle group in that part of the field. But with this tidier first chicane, lap 1 that we saw, certainly far more slipstreaming, more packs happening right here, and it will be incredibly tough for Greg Seitz to break away from John Payne without John Payne making a mistake. There's 17 laps for that to happen. Payne is in a pretty good position there to also save a bit of fuel when it comes towards the pit stop. We're side by side on the front straight. Greg Garris and Richard McClure. Garris getting his nose back in front. McClure getting a tiny bit of the side draft, now cracking out of the throttle and dropping back in line. A deliberate act there by McClure to just sort that out before the braking zone of turn 1 and sort of settle that before it got in front of a judge.
Oh, that was close. McClure there was close to spinning, and all of a sudden he'll be under a lot of pressure from McCormick now in that battle for 9th place. Oh, he's going to... Well, strange lines being taken through the Curva Grande. You want to keep the inside line from the shortest line as much as you can, really, no matter whether there's someone right behind you or not. But McClure goes wide, I think with a view to defending, but actually it's not worked out. McCormick goes through into 9th place. And that is settled rather surprisingly, really. Further behind, there was a side-by-side moment between JC Hay and I think Peter Hallström. JC Hay has prevailed regardless, whoever it was against, and he's up to 12th place so far, up 4 from where he started.
Way off the road from Mike McCormick. Richard McClure gets back ahead. That's wide out of the second of the Parabolicas.
Yeah.
Francis Sturm also goes through, so 2 spots lost from McClure. Wendell Lowe looks to have some pretty significant damage, and there's only 0.3 of a second separating your race leaders right now. John Payne, good qualifying in race 2, good racing here in race 2. Super tactical stuff, so many long straights. The front straight, the run through Curva Grande, the run down towards Ascari, and the run towards Curva Alboreto. 4 times you're in top gear and in a really powerful slipstream per lap. There's so much time to be gained in the wheel tracks of another driver. And it's proving difficult for Greg Seitz to make any impact on John Payne just yet.
You can see why he was weaving around so much earlier on in the day, just to try and get away as quickly as possible, because he knew this was going to happen. McCormick versus Josef Sturm again in towards the first chicane. McCormick gets through into the top 10, but I wonder at what stage the fuel games are going to begin for those two leaders. John Payne is going to be getting, as you say, a big advantage on speed, but actually there's a big advantage on fuel saving as well that he might be able to grab. So can he use that maybe to get himself ahead of Seitz, or is it going to be a straight fight between the two of them throughout the 17 laps? Pit stop required again, of course, in this second race, just like it was in the first.
Shaping up to be a good race so far. Plenty of great battles, plenty of side-by-side in towards the key overtaking opportunities of the lap. The driver's beginning to feel a little bit more confidence and push towards the limits as well. Fastest lap of the race at the moment belongs to John Payne in the slipstream of the race leader with a 142.07. I think we'll see that fall again a little bit later as a 141 that was the fastest lap in race number 1. Well, we won't have Gerhardus Joris and Barry Hill's teammate action to talk about in race number 2, but how about some Russ Addy, John Morgan teammate action? Ulf Olsen's in the middle of that as John Morgan gets super close to him through Curva Alboreto and coming on to the front straight.
Can he do anything here with Russ Addy giving a bit of slipstream? Now Olsen goes to the defensive, but he maybe shouldn't have done that. He should have followed Addy, I think, because now the distant toe will be picked up by Morgan and his slingshot will be too powerful for Olsen to overcome. He's late on the brakes though, Morgan. Is he going to make it in time? Both of them very late on the brakes. My goodness, that was committed from the two of them. Morgan gets through. Olsen put a lot on that, and in the end it's not worked out for him. Greg Garris is going to get round his outside, and no, doesn't go through quite, but he does lose time, Olsen.
Also needing to put the defensive moves on Greg Garris, who did really gain out of all of that. Now he's in the slipstream of Olsen. He'll also catch the slipstream from John Morgan. Garris can gain a couple more spots here if he can race cleverly. Richard McClure not hanging around behind them either. 142.7 in relatively clean air is a very respectable lap time that closes him up on the drivers in front. It's personal best, and you need to look in towards the top 3 to see anyone with that kind of pace, and even then, 2 of those drivers in the top 3 have a little bit of a hint of a slipstream to be had as well. McClure is really finding his feet in race number 2.
It certainly is. As oh no! Morgan off the road and spinning through Ascari, right in front of Olsen, who had to come to a dead stop almost to avoid him. It looked like that was Morgan just losing it on his own there. And look at this, what it's created. Olsen under pressure from Garris, and McClure has now caught them right up.
Very clever stuff to find reverse gear there and not drive straight onto the racetrack in Ascari, Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. And this leads us a great battle right here. And again, McClure perfectly placed to take advantage of it all. He's gained a whole handful of spots here. He'll look for another one. Olsen could be in a bit of a weak position. Greg Garris is looking for a lane to carry the speed of the double toe. That lane closes. He has to lift out of the throttle. Down the inside, Olsen brakes harder earlier, and then not as well through the next phase where McClure gets away from him. Bad traction off the exit for Olsen is going to get Greg Garris side by side. Mike McCormick and Franz Josef Sturm will get back into picture here as well, as John Morgan has pitted. Douglas Beasley has pitted, and you've got your top 17 that haven't at the moment. Olsen's middle of the road with Mike McCormick around the outside. When they make contact, the squeeze.
Oh, Olsen there should have been given space on the outside, or should have been giving space on the outside line there, because McCormick was alongside. He was coming up quickly, and I'm afraid he just turned across him there into the second chicane. I think he was hoping McCormick would back out on the way into the Della Roggia, but he just didn't, and neither did he have to. And unfortunately for Olsen, he's the one who goes down the order. That's what happened to John Morgan, who spun round on his own.
Yeah. Another look on the replay there from a couple of angles at the contact up front. Now this is the race lead, and this is John Payne going for it. They're side by side, and Greg Seitz is under pressure. John Payne has his nose in front, looking to the outside of the big braking zone. He can be good on the brakes there. He can take it, but he can't. He gets squeezed out. Greg Seitz retains the race lead, but a little squirrely in the next traction zone there. Now John Payne's really going to put pressure on him all the way around this lap if he decides he wants to.
Yeah, he's already really starting to apply some pressure now, but he's finally making some moves to overtake, as well as just applying that pressure from so passively from behind. So he's not going for the fuel strategy all out on the fuel strategy anyway, although with 7 laps nearly gone now, we are getting to that stage where the pit stops will be upon us, and the outcome of that will be apparent in towards Lesmo 2. He's not got as good of a run out of there, but he's still in the slipstream, and that's exactly what you need. Just keep up enough with Seitz and you'll be in the slipstream. That's exactly what Payne's done so far in these opening 7 laps.
And here's an illustration of what the slipstream is worth. At the end of the straight, Greg Seitz is doing 254 k's an hour. John Payne's doing 262. 6 kilometers an hour of bonus speed in that slipstream that the leader can't do, but the car in second can with the mighty toe that you get. So they're not topping out 6th gear either, which is sometimes the concern on a fixed setup, that you set it for sort of clean air pace, and the driver in the slipstream at these high-speed race tracks can't quite get that massive overspeed. But Greg Seitz will go for a very interesting strategy. He's pitting a little bit early. John Payne didn't know what to make of it until he stayed out. Ragnar Wisloff stays out. This is an early stop from Greg Seitz.
Now this is interesting. Seitz and where he comes out is going to be vital for this race. Just 5 seconds in the box. He's going to hope he comes out ahead of McClure, but he's not going to manage that, as some have come in behind him as well, which is going to help. Olsen, though, is just going to get through, is he? Well, if he does, then Seitz is going to be just delayed a little bit on this outlap. He needs to get this position, needs to get this 5th place on the exit of the pit lane, and just about does. Now he needs to hang on to it, then he needs to push on this outlap before John Payne can respond with a pit stop of his own.
Oh, it's going to be the worry for Greg Seitz here that he ended up in a little bit of traffic. Here's some of those other drivers stopping. Pitt Holstrom and Ed Benson also in the lane. Shortish one from Benson and Russ Addy in terms of their stop lengths. 3 wide, if you don't mind, heading down towards turn 1. So plenty to play out now as we get into the pit stop phase of this race.
Yeah, 7 laps gone and the race leader in. That's really kicked things off here for the race. Getting very interesting between John Payne and Greg Seitz. If I was John, I would be responding this lap, to be honest, with a pit stop of my own. Whether he decides to really use the lighter tank of fuel to try and stretch a margin over Seitz remains to be seen, but I would want to be in his slipstream and around him for as long as possible, and he is going to go for that strategy. He didn't decide to follow Seitz in, and I wouldn't have done that either, but he has gone 1 lap longer, and he's going to try maybe to take a shorter pit stop. If it's gone really well, he'll get out ahead and break the slipstream, but I don't think that will be quite possible. He'll at the very least be in and around Seitz. As long as he's in the slipstream, he's got a chance of winning.
Absolutely, a few drivers will roll around to the pit lane this time around. He's Greg Seitz on the front straight. John Payne's pit stop is done, so he's heading towards the pit exit. He's just ahead, but Greg Seitz has got speed towards turn 1. I think Payne will be just ahead. Payne will be just ahead, but now it's Greg Seitz in his slipstream, and we'll see how these two can battle. Will the lead change and swap a little bit with these two now? They've got a good lead over Ragnar Wisloff of 6 seconds as well. This is the John Payne and Greg Seitz show for the remaining 9 laps. And right now it's John Payne in the brightest spotlight.
He's leading the way for now, but how quickly does he go on the defensive? And already you could tell he was looking in the mirrors, because that wasn't quite the racing line into the second chicane. It wasn't far off, but also it wasn't quite. So he's got to be careful of that he doesn't lose too much time. But the gap they've got behind suggests they will be able to fight pretty hard for the remainder of this race. Franz Josef Stum versus Mike McCormick goes on in towards the second chicane as well here for 10th place. McCormick's not going to go anywhere from there, and he will stay where he is, just behind Olsen, who'll try and recover some of those places. He's actually very close to the driver who he spun on the nose of a few laps ago.
Back with the race lead out of the Ascari chicane. Greg Seitz is so close, and now he gets that slipstream. He gets that extra speed. He's sitting right underneath the rear wing of John Payne, deliberately waiting for the front straight, not to make the move into parabolic and then get passed back into turn one. He's looking for speed off the parabolica where he's about a car length back, and then immediately, fifth gear, sixth gear, you begin to close in and you begin to look to the inside line, side by side for the race lead once again. With 8 laps to go at Monza, Greg Seitz has the inside line and his nose in front. And the race lead returns to Greg Seitz. John Payne's back where he was before the pit stops, a position that he also felt comfortable to try to strike from.
Yeah, we'll see what he decides to do this time round, because earlier I think it was about fuel, it was about conserving everything for later on. Now though, it's about going for a race win, and he's not going to into the second chicane, he's just going to bide his time. Mike Grandy, meanwhile, is into the pit lane, I believe, for the second time here. He is dropping way down now, and he's back out onto the circuit again after making a 3.9 second stop this time, so now he's down to 17th.
Does one have to wonder if at the end of lap 1, when he took the fast repair, he didn't take the necessary fuel, or if there was some other problem around that?
I mean,
that's going to be my guess.
I guess he couldn't take on the fuel because of the limit and the amount of time left in the race, maybe? Maybe he couldn't get the fuel in.
Yeah. Fuel limit 50%. How tiny is the tank in a Super Formula Light?
It's not that big. Well, as the name suggests, they are very light, and so that would suggest the fuel tank also wouldn't stretch too far either. It's worth noting that not all of the circuits on this calendar require pit stops, but this one certainly will be a fuel-burning heavy one, that's for sure.
Uh, 46-litre tank? Interesting. Greg Seitz and John Payne still leading the way. Ragnar Wisloff, Todd Scholl, Ross Addy, Roberto Catalano, Richard McClure and Greg Garrison. A little bit of clean air. Then here's Franz Josef Stumm and Mike McCormick 9th and 10th. McCormick in that slipstream of Stummy heading down towards turn number 1. They're 2 seconds clear of Ulf Olsson, who we know can be quite quick and should be on a little bit of a fight back in this race potentially. McCormick goes down the inside for 9th on Stumm and just needs to settle it on the exit of the first chicane. The prima variante, if you will.
Yes, very nice. Franz Josef Stumm going to have another go, I reckon, into the second chicane, though. De La Rogier, can he look to the inside, outside? McCormick initially went a little bit defensive, but not totally. And now he can take his racing line through the chicane as well, and hopefully for him, start to run away with 9th place. This is a few positions, 3 positions up from where he qualified, down in 12th, and he's just escaping the clutches of Ulf Olsson as well, who is in the lime green, or the whatever colour you call that, the lighter green and yellow in the background, currently in 11th place, just outside the top 10.
The banana just a day before it's ripe car.
Yes.
Like if you had to, but the texture's not quite right. It's just a little firm. But
Yeah.
But if you say tomorrow, it will be just right. Don't leave it for 2 days. It might go brown. Things go brown very quickly in Brisbane. It is 35 degrees Celsius and very, very humid today. So everything goes brown quickly in my kitchen.
Including the people, I'd imagine, in that sunlight. But there you go. Yeah.
Well, the English tourists go red first before they tan.
Yeah. Then later on we get the colouring. Here goes Franz Josef Stumm. Meanwhile, into 9th place. He's raced past there. His exit off the final corner was very good indeed, and he makes his way into 9th place. This has got the feel of a battle that might well carry on to the very end, unless there's an incident.
Whereas if the English tourists are cricketers, they're only red-faced.
Thank you.
Great evening at the SCG the other night. Glad I got tickets to that beautiful, beautiful game. Franz Josef Sturm ahead of Mike McCormick in their battle is bringing Ulf Olsen a little bit closer. He was 6 or 7 tenths faster on the last lap. He's absolutely in the slipstream right now. This is our highest placed battlers. Greg Seitz is 1.2 seconds ahead of John Payne now. Really put the hammer down, set the fastest lap of the race on the last lap. Pace that John Payne maybe couldn't quite match without an error. You're still within the slipstream at 1.2 seconds back, but now it's 1.4. And now as Seitz begins to break the slipstream, that 4.6 second stop at John Payne maybe makes him look a little bit short on fuel as well. Seitz, this is right now the turning point of the race where he might be able to get out towards a lead like he had in race number 1. Further behind, Mike Grandy, after that second pit stop, he's flying again and he's picking off drivers. I think he's gotten past a few here. Peter Holstrom and Ed Benson now lining up behind JC Hay on the run towards Parabolica, which I've been intermittently calling Curva Alboreto. Give it a couple of years.
Still takes some getting used to, doesn't it? The final corner around this circuit, that's for sure. Mike Grandy's going to have a go here in towards turn 1. He was probably quite close to doing it at the final corner. Look how close he was out of the turn as well. It's going to be a drag race for 14th here as he tries to make his way past Ed Benson. Might well try and capitalise here with a double slipstream. He's keeping to the left-hand side for the moment. He's just arriving a bit late for a move, but that's very early on the brakes from JC Hay. And Ed Benson's going to get through. Oh, no, he's not. He's going to get on the rear brakes too much, and he's going to spin round, allowing Peter Hallström and Tom Dessels to go through as well. So that was a 1 position gained and then a load lost, I'm afraid, for Ed Benson, who is now down outside, or nearly outside the top 20. He's 19th.
Yeah, Benson just got a little shook up in that braking zone there. Didn't quite get what he expected. So then he's like, oh, I've got to make evasive maneuvers. And then as he tries to straighten out again, then he's in a little bit too deep. So he's carrying a lot of brake as he goes to turn in. And he unfortunately loops it around once the inside tyres and the rear tyres get a little bit loose. Through Ascarian, all over the curbs on one side, all over the curbs on the other, and then all through the gravel on the exit for Ulf Olsen. Could you get more excitement from 3 Apexes? I'm not sure. That's not how you stick close to the drivers in front and try to challenge Franz Josef Sturm and Mike McCormick to get inside of the top 10 in this final race.
Yeah, I think the excitement's not the word that Olsen would use for those through corners, but either way, he has lost time as a result of that. He's outside the top 10. And he's going to do well to get back in it now with the time remaining. Desselms versus Beasley, Douglas Beasley on the inside line there. It looks very much like the Anglo-Dutch racing cars, but this is why I held it for a moment. But it's Douglas Beasley gets to 17th. It might be 16th as Roberto Catalano is having another difficult race. It looks like that's the end of his race as well. This is what happened. He returned to pit lane. He went straight on, came to a stop, and I think has had enough. As he returned to pit lane, he certainly has, and this is going to be a big points loss for him because he didn't have a brilliant race 1 either.
So we bid a ciao to Roberto Catalano as he departs the race, and Monza has not as been kind to him as he would like. He ends up behind all of these battling drivers here. JC Hay with Peter Hallström, Douglas Beasley with Tom Desselms. And Jan Eric Skrefsrud the next to gain a position as Roberto Catalano begins to drop down the order.
Yeah, so everybody up a place, especially those outside the top 10 at the time, means that Ulf Olsen now holds that last spot inside the top 10. I think the 12th lap of this race is where it was really won for Greg Seitz. He's now racing out to a 4-second lead. Not sure whether he was just playing with John Payne a little bit in the early part by doing a bit of fuel saving, lifting around himself, but I'm not convinced of that. He's just really turned the pace on, especially since losing the slipstream. John Payne has seen the pace go away from him as well. His last lap was the slowest of anyone inside the top 6, so not a great last lap for him. But lap 12 is the one I highlight really, because he lost 7 tenths that lap, and losing 7 tenths when you are the driver behind is probably going to mean you, in all likelihood, that you lose the slipstream. That's exactly what's happened, and ever since then, John Payne has seen that margin go out dramatically.
I wonder if he got tricked a little bit by being in the slipstream the whole time in the first stint, didn't quite take enough fuel, and then he led a lap in the second bit and ended up in a bad position because his lap times have dropped big time, and Greg Seitz is nailing down his best. Payne's going slower than Wisloff and Scholl and some of those others in the last few laps. Just wonder what's going on there as he continues to lose more time, and a lot of it in the braking zone. So maybe he has a braking problem as well.
It's difficult to tell what's quite happened to him, because it would seem strange that his pace had just completely disappeared. But yeah, it's a difficult one to know at the moment as we have a look at the movers and shakers on the left-hand side. 7th place his game for Richard McClure is the best of the field, up to 6th place, but I'd imagine that's where he will stay. He's nearly 7 seconds behind Rossetti in 5th.
I still believe we'll wait and see with 2 more laps to go. Greg Seitz and the rest of these drivers are coming around onto the start-finish straight, and it's another lap where Greg Seitz is absolutely flying and John Payne is missing almost 1.5 seconds per lap on these last couple of laps. Ragnar Wisloff gains a whole second on him. With 2 laps to go, that's not enough, but it's certainly going to get Ragnar Wisloff quite close if John Payne can't sort something out there. And just in behind Ulf Olsen at the moment, John Morgan also going pretty quickly. His personal best lap of the race, last lap around, caught him up to Olsen. Olsen catching back up again to Sturm and McCormick after his scary shenanigans of a couple of laps ago.
This is the sort of biggest group on the track now, really, with these battlers for 8th place. It looks like Greg Seitz might well be on his way to another victory. He's won double in an evening, now the last 3, if he can do this one. Phillip Island, Mugello, and now maybe Monza as well. As I mentioned earlier, your best result from the 2 races is taken forward to your score, and that's exactly what Seitz has been able to achieve for the last few rounds as we continue to follow these guys up and towards the sky. The white flag's waving for the race leader, and that signals to everybody there's just 1 more lap as we have a look at Douglas Beasley, who's been for a spin at the 2nd chicane.
Other chainsaw manufacturers are available. Could have used that when I was doing a bit of gardening at my brother's house last week. A tree fell down in a storm, and I think I spent 2 days of my life cutting up timber. Michael Cormick, Ulf Olsen, and John Morgan with that incredible pace to show late on in the race. He's going to pull out from behind the slipstream of Ulf Olsen, look to find the slipstream of someone else if he can. Mike McCormick on the racing line will just help out John Morgan with a little bit of extra speed into turn 1 for the final time for these drivers in this round. Olsen so daring on the brakes, keeps a bit of his car in there over the curbs, and just staying ahead is John Morgan. So long as that's not a slowdown, I think he's all in the clear, but they both lose a little bit of time to the next car ahead.
Yeah, and that might be a time that they're not going to get back now in this race because there is so little time remaining. They might as well fight for 10th between themselves. Olsen has another look at responding in towards the 2nd chicane. Oh, it's late on the brakes from Morgan. He's never going to make that. He was never going to make it. He was too late on the brakes. He might get away with it, though. He'll have a slowdown, surely. But Olsen went off himself, so Morgan might actually get away with it. No, he won't. Oh, he tried to serve the slowdown right in front of Olsen, who hit the back of him and got himself disqualified.
I was watching it where the slowdown, where the flag was still out. The slowdown flag was out for John Morgan. He didn't clear it before the first Lesmo. He cleared it in the first Lesmo and got driven into by Ulf Olsen. Greg Seitz makes a clean sweep of Monza. Race 1 pole, race 2 pole, and race 2, the fastest lap in both from what I can tell. Absolutely. Greg Seitz, a sweep of Monza. Other positions still to be decided on the final lap here. Eugene Clark ahead of Mike Grandy, JC Hay ahead of Peter Holstrom. This is Clark with Grandy behind, having made 2 stops after early damage to the inside of Parabolica, the final corner on the final lap, and Mike Grandy gets himself into 11th. Eugene Clark smart enough to try to cut back underneath, think Grandy will just have the speed, so long as he's got the fuel, to the checkered flag to get that 11th place at the final opportunity.
Just about made it as well. That was pretty close. Clark was really coming up on him on the way towards the end there, but couldn't quite do it. JC Hay hangs on from Peter Hallström, 13th and 14th. Then Tom Desselms ahead of Ed Benson, who manages to get back to 16th. Beasley will be promoted to 17th as Ulf Olsen will go down the field. I'm pretty sure he's hit the instant limit because he disappeared into thin air as he hit the back of Morgan, who tried to serve a slowdown through the middle of a corner. And if you ever needed to have confirmation, it's never a great idea to try and do it there.
Even in a straight line, not a great idea to do it on the racing line. Depends, but he had plenty of opportunity, and then, yeah, I'm not sure it was entirely clever from both of them at all times. But at the podium is Greg Seitz, John Payne, and Ragnar Wisloff. Todd Scholl in 4th, Russ Addy in 5th, and Richard McClure, one of my standout drivers and much improved in race 2. That's a good result there in 6th. Greg Garris, Franz Josef Sturm, Mike McCormick, and John Morgan as the top 10. Morgan finishing in very much a low downforce spec at the end of that one. Mike Grandy, Eugene Clark, super close between them as we saw. And then JC Hay, Peter Hallström, Tom DeSalms, Ed Benson, Douglas Beasley. Expect Ulf Olsen to actually continue to drop. If you refresh that one, I've got him down in 20th. By the time now, because Jan-Erik Skrefsrud and Art McEwen passed him on the final lap to 19th and 20th. And then Roberto Catalano retiring for reasons we couldn't quite get to the bottom of. Wendell Lowe and Gerhardus Jorgensen with damage. It saw them in 22 and 23rd spots. Fastest lap of the race of 141.472 went to Greg Seitz, which only just eclipsed John Payne's 141.5. Seitz is definitely a man on a mission to pick them all up. He's on not on a mission to speak to us today, apparently.
No.
So we'll go to John Payne for you, Ewan.
Yeah, let's have a chat to John Payne instead. Welcome, John. Good to have you with us, and congratulations on finishing 2nd as well. You were with Greg for ages throughout that race, but I think about lap 12, with about 5 laps to go, you eventually lost the slipstream. Just how important was it to stay within a second of Greg if you wanted to win that race, and how hard was it to stay with him?
Oh, it was pretty hard, especially when you look at the fast lap. I thought I had him covered because I towed on him and got, for me, a very fast lap, a 141.5. And I thought, well, at least he won't have that. But, of course, he did go get it on the very last lap of 141.4. Yeah, I think I underestimated my fuel, so I thought if I ran with him, I was going to run out, on that back straight. So I just chose to fight another day, and since I had a very bad race the first race, I just thought I needed to get home with a second, and that's what I did.
Well, exactly. What I was going to ask you, what were you thinking between the two races there? It's a unique scoring system which allows you effectively to have a bad first race and still get away with it as far as the points are concerned. So what were you thinking about how you were going to approach the second race after what happened in race 1?
Well, for starters, I needed to qualify better. And I told Roberto outside of the sim that that was my fault in race 1. I stuck my nose where it didn't need to be. I didn't even think I noticed that he was stuck in the middle going into that first corner, and I tried to back out, but just not enough. So qualify better, which I did, and then just take off, just try to keep it clean and come home with a second. Because, I thought I did pass Greg once, but he won't even have it, in the middle of the race. He wants most laps led, everything. So I wasn't going to fight it for it. I had to have a second place. I couldn't afford to waste that race. I already raced the first one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, congratulations on coming home with the second place in race 2 regardless, and thanks for coming to chat to us at the end as well.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks very much. John Payne, second place here in race 2 at Monza.
And third place, Ragnar Wisloff will join us again. Monza is always a slipstream track. When you've got it, you feel like a hero, and when you spend most of your race just outside of it, is it a bit frustrating?
Slightly, yes. Yeah, a little bit. But, it is what it is. And if you can't keep up with the guys in front in the first couple of corners, then that's what you get. So it's all my own fault. I can't blame anyone.
And then talk us through a little bit of the strategy, because not every race of this league is a pit stop race, but it was today at Monza. So what does it change for you in terms of how you race, what you focus on, and where success can come from?
You need to prepare. So you need to figure out when the pit stop's going to be. And you also need to figure out beforehand how much fuel you're going to take. In practice, that's reasonably easy to do. We know how many laps it is, so it's easy to do. And then stick with it. I got a bit worried in the first race. I was fuel saving a little bit because I thought I might be short, but I wasn't. And so in the second race, I just kept going. And I think I had a liter left at the end. But that's the important part. And I think many people just rely on the automatic fueling system of iRacing. And that can be quite conservative. There's no point in ending up with, 2-3 laps left at the end of the race.
Certainly, by my numbers here, you had one of the shortest stops in the final race here. Not quite enough to get you on the tail of John Payne, but enough to stay clear of Todd Scholl, Russ Addy, a couple of the other quick drivers.
Yeah. And pit entry is always important. It's easy on this track to brake quite early, but you can brake halfway between the line and the yellow cones, and still, get to the right speed before they start counting. So that's important as well. And, the tenths do count. It's very difficult to gain 5 tenths on the track, but it's reasonably easier to get it in the pit stops. So that's important to do your homework, I think.
Yeah, very interesting. A slightly different way. It also maybe broke up a little bit of the slipstream trains as well at the middle point in the race.
Yeah. I had a good seat, and I think we need to have a collection and buy Greg a new wheel. It seemed he couldn't quite make his car go straight, so I think we need to look at that. Maybe he needs some help there.
Okay, well, Ragnar, wishing you a fast repair, and hopefully we can see you racing in 60 Plus Racing Adventures again soon.
Yes, this is the last race for me this season. I'm going in for surgery next week, and I'll have a reconvalescence period of a couple of months, so probably no racing until the next season. But it's always good fun, and thank you guys for making a good production and showing us old folks off to the world in the best possible manner.
Scheduling your winter rebuild just in time for sailing season to come around then?
Yes, thankfully that should be the case, and I'll be off the crutches and crawling around the boat when May comes, so I'm looking forward to that, definitely. Thanks for asking, David.
Wishing you the best, and congratulations on the double podium at Monza.
Thank you very much. It was good fun, although it was a bit lonely, but I still had fun. Thanks.
Ragnar Wisloff there from third place in race number 2. This is what the rest of the schedule for 60 Plus Racing Adventures looks like this season. Interlagos, Jerez, Montreal, Imola, Red Bull Ring, and we'll see you again on RaceSpotTV at Zandvoort on March the 5th for the finale. At the moment, it's looking like Greg Seitz' championship to lose. John Payne able to challenge him somewhat today. Ragnar Wisloff, we have just heard, will not be though, and we wish him the very, very best. Thank you so much for joining us on RaceSpotTV for 60 Plus Racing Adventures Super Formula Lights League. Greg Seitz absolutely owning the Royal Park at Monza. We'll see you in March for the finale of this championship.